Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
This is the clerk with a courtesy announcement that the meeting is now available on the meeting portal and YouTube.
Hi, Lizanne. Can we do a mic check, please?
Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you. We can also see you. Hi, Harry. Can we do a mic check, please?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much. We can hear you and we can see you. Hi, Marianne. Marianne, can we do a mic check, please?
Mic check.
We can hear you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Supervisor Wasserman. We can't hear you, sir. I cannot hear you. We've got your video, but no audio. Hello, Jack. Can we do a mic check, please?
Yes.
We can see you and we can hear you. Thanks very much.
All right, you're welcome.
Supervisor, I can see you and I believe I can hear some background noise.
Can you hear my dogs?
I can hear you. Yes, we got you.
Okay, good. I did the old turn it off and turn it back on trick.
Best way to do it.
All right, I have word that Supervisor Simidian is going to be a few minutes late. So we'll give it a couple of minutes and then we'll open up with calling to order, public comment. And then I'm sure he'll be there shortly.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Peggy, who's going to be clerking for you today.
Clerk is, okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Dave. Got Peggy.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Peggy.
Good morning, Supervisor Welshman.
In this whole 2 years, I've never had a equipment issue, but I just turned it off and turned it back on and voila.
Reboot is the answer to many issues.
I agree. And there's Sylvia Gallegos.
Good morning, Supervisor. It struck me that it felt a little lonely for you that no one has their camera on. And so.
You know, I appreciate that. There's Jacqueline, there's Harry.
But usually we don't turn our cameras on unless we're talking.
That's all right. And Supervisor Simidian is here. So Peggy, let's get it going.
Vice Chairperson Simidian
Here.
and Chairperson Wasserman.
Here as well. Thank you very much. We'll ask for public comment right now. Let me check if both of our screens, I show one person. Is that what you show, Peggy?
That is correct. We have one speaker, Rhoda Fry.
Rhoda Fry. Go for it, and we'll give you 3 minutes, Rhoda.
And Rhoda, I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute to begin speaking.
And as you know, it's about something not on today's agenda.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to apologize to Supervisor Wasserman for the perception that I was not speaking, that I was speaking on an agenda item during public comment. I did send you an email yesterday.
Oh, thank you.
And because I was specifically talking about reclamation, not the purchase of the property. And in deference to you, I did not speak during that other item because I felt that you might have thought I was double dipping, which in earnest, I didn't think I was, but.
No worries.
So
No,
anyway.
I look forward to reading your email. Thank you, Rhoda. Go ahead.
And I also sent another email today regarding public comment. First, I wanted to give a really big thank you to the Department of Environmental Health for doing due diligence and evaluating the hazmat and soils at Valco. The work that they're doing is so important and a service and duty to protect the public health and make sure that housing built there is safe for our residents. I also want to thank Supervisor Simidian for calling out for the decade-long of violation record for Lehigh. And I know this might sound like it's the tail wagging the dog, but perhaps there could be some cleanup in some items that probably should be violations. And I know that staff has been so overburdened with doing double duty with COVID, but since we're doing this 10-year report, then maybe this is time to get those things sewn up. One of them is that there were structural changes made to these giant 80-year-old silos at Lehigh. They were falling. What happens is that the rebar starts to rust and then concrete chunks start falling down and could hurt people. And they did a structural repair. They consulted with this a company that creates a specific product that was engineered for that purpose. There should have been a building permit for that. And so that I think should be a violation, just so that we have a correct record of violation. The other one was in another part of the responsibility of the county, and that is there was a 6 million gallon chlorinated water spill to Permanente Creek, also at Lehigh. And it should have been reported to the California Office of Emergency Services. Once again, it's not in the administrative record. It's important that that record go back so that we can find out where are the spills going on in their state. And also it'd be useful for the report that Supervisor Simidian will be receiving in May. This also winds up being in the purview of the county, as the county is the CUPA when there is failures for reporting to the California Office of Emergency Services. I thank you very much and have a wonderful morning.
And Rhoda, if I can ask you to stay on for just 1 minute. We currently have 4,300 county employees that were plucked by the CEO to serve as disaster service workers. And I've been told by the end of the month, we should get 100 of the 4,300, quiet little dogs, of the 4,300 back. So it's simply 2%. And the planning department, the various departments involved in all areas of the county have just been, 10 to 20 to 30% of the people taken to fight
I know.
COVID. As you brought up earlier, I can't go back and forth with you because
Yes.
it's public comment, but I appreciate the fact that you acknowledge we're shorthanded and that everybody's doing as much as they can do. And as COVID goes away, our ability to handle things will improve dramatically. Thank you very much. Peggy, do we have any more speakers?
That concludes our speakers.
Thank you. And with that, Supervisor Simidian, item number 3 is to approve our consent calendar, which currently includes items 8 through 14. Do you wish to put anything on, take anything off, or make any comments?
Happy to move approval of the consent calendar as contained in our published agenda, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair, I will second that. Peggy, I see no members of the public waiting to speak. Do you concur?
I do.
Thank you very much. So 8 through 14 are handled. We now move on to item number 9.
Apologies, can we do a quick roll call vote for that motion?
Oh, yes, thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Supervisor or Vice Chairperson Simidian
Aye.
and Chairperson Wasserman.
I as well. And we move on to item number 4 in our agenda. And let me just flip over to that. I see Jacqueline, I see Sylvia. This is regarding the Stanford University Community Plan.
Yes, let me start with
Yes.
some introductions. Supervisor Wasserman, Sylvia Gallegos, Deputy County Executive. And I have with me Jacqueline Anshana, who is the Director of Planning and Development. And we also have Jeff Bradley, who is our principal with the planning group that's helping support all of our efforts with respect to the Stanford Community Plan update. I'll be very brief, and all of us would be available to respond to any questions. We have, as you know, for the last couple of years been preparing this community plan update, and we have embarked on numerous studies to support the findings that would be made as recommendations to the board. The studies have different tracks. They've encountered unique and separate challenges, but we set forth in the 7th quarterly report when we anticipate having some administrative drafts. We are in the midst of finalizing both, and should say finalizing, it's constantly modifying, but we have an internal calendar for planning purposes because we will have a Stanford Community Plan updates to the board at the end of this year, as well as our housing element. We are, as I said, finalizing that, but we're also soon publishing a public calendar so that the public would be aware of major public milestones, including community meetings for each of the major studies, as well as discussions prior to that with Stanford University as the principal stakeholder in this process. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions that the committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacqueline, do you have anything to add?
No, not at this time, Supervisor Wasserman. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. And Supervisor Simidian, we don't have any speakers. I'm going to turn to you for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just ask staff, there was passing mention in the report to public meetings and planning commission review. I think those are the 2 items for which we don't yet have estimated dates, or at least if we do, I didn't see them on our timeline. Does staff have a thought about when those might happen, just so we can start thinking about how to ensure public awareness?
Yes.
And Sylvia, if I may, I do want to acknowledge we do have a couple of speakers, which we'll get to when Supervisor Simidian wishes to.
Thank you. So thank you for the question, Supervisor Simidian. That is correct. We had a meeting earlier this week of staff, and we are in the midst of identifying those community meeting dates, and we are coordinating with your office because obviously your office needs to be available, and this is of great interest to you. So we are in the midst, and we are poised. I'm anticipating soon from staff a final draft that I can review, and we have an upcoming meeting that we'd like to discuss in more detail, the scheduling.
Thank you for that. Presumably, those meetings will be scheduled in a way that allows you to deliver the product, though, by the end of the year, as you indicated earlier, yes?
Yes, sir. We're committed to having this done pursuant to our schedule.
All right, thank you. And then, and it may be that this is something we want to take up at other parts of the agenda as well, but I have been curious about the impact of state legislation, housing legislation like SB 9 as an example on the Stanford campus. Is there a process by which the impact of recent state legislation can and will be folded into the various studies and consideration and community plan updates?
Yes, and in fact, with respect to Stanford, and in particular with the passage of SB 9, I will say that that law didn't contemplate what I would describe as the unique circumstance at Stanford. And so we are working on, with council, trying to provide the right context and scenarios to get clarifying responses from HCD, because it will be necessary to help finish this work. So we are doing that, and yes, we are factoring new state legislation with respect to our work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is received report only, so there is no vote. But Peggy, may we please hear from our two speakers with 2 minutes each?
Our first speaker is Jessica Von Borg. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute to begin speaking.
Good morning. This is Jessica Von Borg. I'm the Executive Director of Land Use at Stanford. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. We're happy to see that the county is planning community meetings to review all studies with the public and stakeholders. Thank you for that. If there's an opportunity to host an additional meeting in person, we would be very happy to host a meeting on campus to ensure that stakeholders such as Stanford faculty and students, and especially the SCRL homeowners, have an opportunity to participate in the process. SCRL held a board meeting last night, and at that meeting, they voiced great interest in the county offering several options for providing input and for them to learn more about the county's new policies and processes that will impact their homes, such as changes in the development standards and possible zoning changes that have been discussed. We encourage the county to engage in a robust outreach effort with those within the San Juan Residential District. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jessica.
Our next speaker is Aaron Effner. Please accept the unmute to begin.
Hi. Oh, sorry, we have an echo. One moment. Thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me some time to speak. My name is Aaron Effner. I am with the Land Use and Environmental Planning Group at Stanford, and I just have a couple of quick statements. First, we have regularly offered our availability and willingness to provide assistance in reviewing the county's studies that are being conducted. Sylvia mentioned them in support of the eventual community plan process. And I just wanted to state today that we remain willing and available to help out. At the least, we would like to be able to be given the opportunity to make sure that the reports represent the facts that Stanford has provided to the county via data exchanges in order to support the information and the topics of the study supporting the community plan amendment. So we remain willing and hoping to get an opportunity to engage further with the county on those topics. And secondly, maybe about a month ago, Stanford rolled out a series of affordability enhancements. So several of them are directly related to some of the topics being cited in the community plans. And we just wanted to reiterate our desire that the affordability enhancements are reflected in the studies and also the community plan policies that are being developed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Aaron.
And that concludes our speakers.
All right, Supervisor Committee, unless there's any objection, we'll consider that report received. No vote is necessary. We'll move on to item number 5. Receiving a report from the Department of Planning and Planning and Development. And so we turn to Jacqueline Onciano.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. The report that we're bringing back is a report on the fire safe regulations. That's item number 5, I believe. And I will turn the presentation briefly over to Robert Kane and Lisa McKyle. We also have Lizanne Reynolds who is available should we have any legal questions relative to the fire safe regulations appeal process. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Robert and Lisa.
Hi, good morning, Chairperson Wasserman and Supervisor Smidian. My name is Robert Kane. I'm an associate planner in the Department of Planning and Development. We submitted a report at the request of your committee on the status of the state fire safe regulations and the appeals process implemented by the county to handle those regulations. And I don't have a presentation for you today, but I do have some points that I would like to emphasize in regards to that report. Thank you. So first, I think it's important to acknowledge that the county supports the intent of the fire safe regulations to ensure public health and safety regarding access and response during a fire, which encourages safety for both residents and for the fire responders. This is a serious issue that is taken very seriously by ourselves, as well as our colleagues, obviously at CAL FIRE and County Fire. Through the appeals hearing, the county has provided several opportunities for applicants to provide information, including additional information to support their administrative records. The hearing officer and the county council who advises them are not involved with the review of these proposals prior to the appeal hearing. There is a strict firewall in place. The role of the hearing officer is to make a decision as to whether the applicant is offering, what the applicant is offering provides the same practical effect as the regulations in question. Their job is not to provide guidance on how to provide that same practical effect. It's whether or not what has been proposed meets the same practical effect. It's important to emphasize that an exception or appeal of an exception may not be granted if there's a mismatch between what the applicant is offering and the intent of the regulations that are not being met. For example, additional water supply is not equivalent to a sufficient evacuation route. It should also be noted that the 3 cases that have been heard so far are examples of somewhat extreme non-compliance to the state regulation standards. The dead end roads in question in 2 of the cases are nearly twice the length allowed by the state law. And because of density on one of the cases at the beginning of the dead end road, it's actually nearly 4 times the length that would be allowed under the state regulations. And the 3rd case involves a road that is only 60% of the required minimum width for a road to allow residents to evacuate while fire responders are also entering the area at the same time. They should not be used as a barometer for how all future cases will be decided. And with that, that concludes my statement, and I am available for any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you very much, Robert. Supervisor Smidian, if it's okay with you, we have a member of the public that wishes to speak on this issue that I'll go to first. I see your thumbs up. Peggy, please allow our speaker to speak for 2 minutes.
Our next speaker is Margaret. Please accept the unmute to begin speaking. Margaret, there you go. And your mic is open, Margaret.
Go ahead.
All right,
Margaret.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. My name is Margaret Belska. Exception is defined in the new ordinance to mean an alternative means or method to achieve a specific standard. Unfortunately, these hearings are not alternative means hearings. I wasn't even allowed to discuss alternative means at my hearing. One of the other applicants spent thousands on a fire safety expert, and every alternative they proposed was rejected. The only means that Chief Estrada will accept is verbatim compliance with what CAL FIRE is asking for. Acceptable alternatives do not exist. This isn't just a case of past applicants not receiving their desired outcomes. No applicant ever will. The last 3 hearings set a precedent that no alternative solutions are acceptable to the road width or dead-end road requirements. These aren't isolated cases. There's 30 projects that are blocked. Quite honestly, no one was surprised that all 3 appeals were denied. It was a foregone conclusion because the process is fundamentally broken. The fact is, this hearing process shouldn't need to exist in the first place. The offsite improvements that CAL FIRE is recommending are unconstitutional and illegal. The planning department should not be imposing them on landowners, and they don't have to. No other county in California is applying these disproportionate offsite improvement requirements on their citizens because they don't want to get sued for unconstitutional taking. Why is Santa Clara applying the law differently than everyone else? Why are they blocking over 30 single-family homes during a housing crisis? The planning department can't afford to wait for the state to fix this. Every other county in the state is asking the Board of Forestry to slow down and do more due diligence. The board is not going to expedite things to save one rogue county who is doing things differently than everyone else. The board has confirmed there is no timeline or due date for the new revision. Thank you.
Next speaker is Dennis Zaff. Please accept the unmute to begin. Your mic is open, Dennis.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Dennis is not responding. We do have one additional speaker.
Yep, let's move on and then come back.
Move on to Anna.
Please.
Please accept the unmute to begin speaking.
Hello, my name is Anna Sinapi. I am also a landowner whose building application has been rejected due to these fire safe regulations. I'm not one of the appellants who was rejected. However, I think I stand in the position of a lot of other landowners who were watching those 3 appeals that went to the Planning Commission in front of Chief Estrada and are not pursuing an appeal because we've seen that 3 out of 3 have been rejected and 0 guidance has been provided as to what constitutes an alternative means. And it appears that, as Margaret said, only strict compliance will be approved. This fire safe regulation has wiped out billions of dollars worth of property, including mine. And these are the first 30 applicants. And I agree with everything that Margaret said about the enforcement of this regulation being unconstitutional and out of the ordinary with every other county in California. And I think the policy of enforcing it unilaterally is unfair and unconstitutional and unacceptable and directly affects me as Joe Simidian's constituent. Thank you.
Thank you.
And going back to Dennis Zaff one last time, please. One more time, Mr. Zaff. We clicked over each other. There you go.
Go ahead, please.
Your mic is open, but we are not hearing you. There's nothing more that I can do on my end.
Understood. Thank you, Peggy, for trying that. Supervisor Simidian, I've got a couple of questions, but I will defer to you if you have some questions first.
I do, and I also have some comments, Mr. Chair, but why don't you go ahead, and that may obviate the need for some of my questions or comments.
All right, thank you very much. Is Liz Ann on? I knew she was available. I see Lisa nodding her head. So
Yes.
Liz Ann, there you are.
Liz Ann is on.
Good morning, Liz Ann. So a couple of things. One, I know when the state makes laws, the county has to follow. We certainly experienced that with COVID and everything else. We're federal, state, county. I get that. So I also am a big fan of property rights, the ability to build a home if you own a piece of land. And I'm hearing these terms such as acceptable alternatives, but there aren't any. I'm hearing concerns about width of road and dead end roads. And I certainly understand and respect, you know, a fire truck getting to some place, you want to have access. A fire truck not having to back out, you want to have that. But sometimes there are physical limitations. And sometimes the improvements requested, if it's doubling the width of a road with a retaining wall, can make building wholly impractical. So from a legal standpoint, Lizanne, the homeowners, what alternatives, I mean, do they have the ability to put together and sue the state, sue CAL FIRE? What legal alternatives do they have?
Okay, so I want to start by setting the framework for how these issues are addressed. You're right, these are state regulations. We don't have authority to just disregard them. The fire safe appeal process that is the subject of the staff report today really is of very limited scope. The purpose of that is if an applicant feels that they have some other alternatives for meeting the intent of the particular regulations that they're not technically meeting, then that's what Chief Estrada considers. He doesn't have the authority to, and you can't have an apples oranges thing. Like the road standards that are problematic here are really addressing ingress and egress. Ingress by emergency personnel, egress by property owners and other residents. So if somebody, say, for example, is proposing to have more on-site water storage or more defensible space on-site, that does not provide the same practical effect as having a road that's wide enough or
Right.
not having a dead-end road. So that's what we've been seeing at these appeal hearings is a mismatch between what the applicants are proposing and what the regulations require. And so that's why Chief Estrada has been denying them. Yep. Because they aren't addressing the access issues. So that is the limited scope of his appeal, the exception appeal process. Yep. But there's also a process by which property owners can appeal the conditions for, alleging that they're an unconstitutional taking or some other reason. And that is, they can appeal their conditions of approval to the Planning Commission and then ultimately the Board of Supervisors. And that's where issues such as, an unconstitutional taking are being considered. And Ms. Belska has a pending appeal with the Planning Commission. It was heard in January and then continued to February for more information about the cost of building a secondary access road. So there are remedies. Once a property owner exhausts their appeals before the Planning Commission and possibly also the Board of Supervisors, depending on what happens at the Planning Commission, then there's a court of law that they could also pursue remedies there. I know this sounds like an arduous process, but these are state requirements. We can't just disregard them. Right. It may be in the future once we get more guidance from the Planning Commission and or Board of Supervisors about what they consider to be an unconstitutional taking, that those determinations can be made at the staff level. But at this point, it's a big deal. It's a big deal to find that a state regulation would affect a taking.
Sure.
And it's not a decision that we take lightly, and we need to make sure we have an adequate evidentiary record to support any such decision. So that's why, it's a little bit of a procedural challenge right now. We are hoping that we get new regulations, but and the draft regulations that we have right now would address this problem, but we just don't know when they're going to be taking effect because there are multiple parties on both sides threatening to sue the Board of Forestry. So it's kind of a difficult process.
Thank you. I appreciate all that. I think about a lot of homes around me that are legally non-compliant. And that's pre-existing conditions. And if you have a 20-foot wide road coming to your home and the state says all roads should be 40 feet wide, well, there's got to be people that got to be grandfathered in. But I just wanted to make it clear the county must follow the state. I believe the state has some problems. I appreciate the documents and the wording that the Planning and Building Department are crafting and putting together to try and help residents. And I want the residents listening to know that this is what the situation is. And we understand, I certainly sympathize, and I appreciate all that information, Lizanne. I'll turn to Supervisor Submitti, and I'm done with my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me follow up, and I don't know if it's Ms. Reynolds or Ms. Anchano or others who can or should lean in. First, just a couple of comments. And I do think we need to start with an acknowledgement that these fire safety concerns that are at the center of this conversation are real, they're legitimate, they need to be addressed, and have gone unaddressed, frankly, for a very long time. I remember dealing with these issues as a member of the state legislature a decade ago. That being said, I think that the process that the state has engaged in to date has let us all down. And, you know, Mr. Chair, you and I are used to casting votes where somebody's happy, somebody's unhappy. There might be a winner, there might be a loser. Rarely have I seen a process that has left pretty much everybody unhappy, including the staff who have to administer it, as well as members of the public who have to make their way through it and who have to live with the consequences of the decisions. I think the fact that essentially what we got was a set of decisions at the state level, but the opportunity for people to appeal, or the necessity for people to appeal at the county level, is at the heart of the problem. Let me just say, for any members of the public who are listening or concerned, while I think this was a difficult process for counties to implement, I don't think our county stepped up and implemented this process as well as it could have and should have. And I think sometimes you just need to say that. I think our county stumbled coming out of the gate, quite frankly, and I'm sorry for that. I just think, in spite of people's best efforts, that should be acknowledged. I'm really most interested today in figuring out, all right, how do we handle this going forward? How do we make the best out of what is clearly a bad situation? So let me start with applications that have not yet, or appeals, I guess I should say, that have not yet been received. We're expecting these new regulations. At one point, I think I was told July, or we were told July 1st. What's the current thinking about that deadline? Do we think it's something we can reasonably count on, or not at all? And should folks be encouraged to wait? Are they being encouraged to wait until we get the new regulations? Where does all that stand? Then I want to come back and talk about people who've already been through the process.
Kathleen?
Yes, Jacqueline Anchano, Director of Planning and Development. We are anticipating with the Board of Forestry that they will make a decision by July 1st. We don't control them. We've tried to share this, and when I say tried, because people hear certain things, we've shared this information with the public, Supervisor Smitty. We have written letters to the Board of Forestry asking them to make a decision earlier than July. And so we sit and we wait for the Board of Forestry.
Well, Ms. Anchano, thank you, Ms. Anchano. That's helpful. And I know it's hard for your team, to work with a moving target. I'm going to use the standard that I often use when I'm asking you these kinds of questions, which is, if I was standing at sidewalk office hours talking to a constituent had a piece of property that was in this process, and they walked up to me and they said, Supervisor Smitty, Joe, what do you think? It sounds to me like the best advice I could give them is, there's not a heck of a lot of flexibility right now. And if I were you, even though I know there is the time value of money and a cost to waiting, I'd wait until you see some new regulations. Now, that's me. Anything I just said that sounds like it would be bad advice?
No.
Okay. Well, I do think any effort you can make to help folks understand that the early experience indicates that there's not a lot of flexibility, that the outcomes are not going to make folks happy, and that we expect some changes. I I think that's understanding that we can't guarantee action by folks at the state. I think that's going to be helpful and important information to share, so we don't set people up for failure in the process. I'll just let it go at that. Now, how many folks do we have who've now been through the process and had their appeals denied?
3, to my knowledge. Will you
Okay.
confirm, Lisa Mikhail, 3?
That's correct, 3.
Okay.
And one in waiting.
Okay, and so I'll call it 3 or 4. And at the risk of stating the obvious, but I want to just put it on the record, I have no opinion whatsoever about what should or shouldn't be permitted in those 3 or 4 cases. So my questions and comments are all without regard to the suitability for development of any of the sites, because I really don't have an opinion or the knowledge to have an opinion, frankly. So what's the recourse for folks who say, wait a minute, I am the victim of bad timing. I showed up, right before or right after these new rules went into place. I'm not getting an outcome that is a happy one from the perspective of the applicant. Do they have the ability to, in effect, come back after July the 1st, understanding again the time value of money and the cost of waiting?
No, not the applicants who have already gone through the process of the appeal. What then awaits them is they can appeal the conditions of approval that have been applied to their project, which is what County Council outlined. And that goes to the Planning Commission, and depending on the decision from the Planning Commission, it would move to the Board of Supervisors. And
that, if they got a favorable outcome, that would that have the practical impact of giving them essentially a good result from their standpoint? I mean, is that is that sufficient to address their concerns?
It depends on the action of the hearing authority. Staff's recommendation and weighing staff's recommendation moving forward. So I have to say it depends on what the hearing authority does.
Well, is there any anything that is forcing folks to make these appeals on a timely basis that in effect, I see Ms. Reynolds' hands going up here, that would force folks to make these appeals on a timely basis to their detriment because they'd be stuck living with the current rules, or we'd be stuck applying the current rules with respect to conditions of approval? Through the chair, it looked like Ms. Reynolds was trying to help us chart this course.
Yep.
Yeah. So the first issue I will discuss is the whether they want to challenge the Chief Estrada's determination on their exception appeal. That is a final decision by the county, and so they have a limited amount of time to challenge that in court. So we have been entering into tolling agreements with applicants and their attorneys to defer the time by which they need to file a lawsuit to challenge Chief Estrada's determination, so that we can avoid, hopefully, unnecessary litigation. The problem we have with the applications going through, other than that process, the applications going through planning has a responsibility under the Permit Streamlining Act to issue conditions of approval within a certain amount of time. So they don't have flexibility there. If an applicant wants to challenge those conditions, which include the problematic fire safe conditions, then they have a limited amount of time to do that under our ordinance code. We can't really waive that, but they could file their appeal, and there is no strict deadline by which the county needs to hear that, either at the Planning Commission or board level. So the applicant can say, I'm fine with you sitting on this appeal until, say, July 1st or something like that, or whenever. So there is some flexibility as to when the appeals are heard before the Planning Commission and potentially also the board. And then also after that process is exhausted, we can also enter into tolling agreements if they end up getting a decision that they don't like from the county. say after the Board of Supervisors, we can do tolling agreements for that too. So there is some flexibility
Yes.
with regard to that. Ms. Belska does not want to postpone it. She wants a decision, which is understandable. So that's why her appeal is being heard by the Planning Commission now.
Yeah, I don't think we can sort through individual case by cases here, but let me ask the question this way. Ms. Reynolds and or Ms. Unshano and or any other member of the county staff, understanding that two members of this committee can't give formal direction with respect to waiving, not waiving, tolling, not tolling. What do you all need if there is support at the board level for accommodating what I'll call a strategic delay while the state gets its regulations in order? Do you need to hear that from the county executive? Do you need formal action by the board? Do you just need a sense of this committee? I see a ghost raising her hand, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Supervisor, we'll take this back to staff so we can review the request and provide an appropriate response, which we can do in an off-agenda memo or some formal way to document that, because I think that's certainly worthy of consideration.
I think in addition to that, what staff has been doing more recently is drafting the conditions so that they require compliance with the fire safe regulations in effect when a building permit is issued. That gives several additional months to, for this all to shake out and hopefully get new regulations, because between the time an application is approved and you actually get a building permit issued, there are usually several months.
Supervisor Committee, and I think what we just heard from Lizanne shows there's a lot of ways the time can be extended, the tolling agreement, when you pick the building permit. And Sylvia, I appreciate you looking into this further with this group of 5 that we have here with us today and coming back and letting us know. But Supervisor Committee, do you feel there's means in place?
I take your point, Mr. Chairman, that there are lots of ways that it can be done. But what I'm hoping to do is get some assurance that it will be done. And I think, in fairness to our county staff, they kind of need to know what's the expectation of the board, or at least the county executive. So I'm fine asking formally and as a matter of record for staff to identify the necessary and appropriate steps to ensure that we give folks every opportunity to comply with applicable state regulations. I think that language, Ms. Reynolds, is sort of clear enough. Yes. Oh, I see a nod behind that, Matt. But the other piece of this is, I don't want to encourage people to appeal endlessly when they shouldn't. On the other hand, I'm feeling like for the first, 4 or 5 folks who had to go through this exercise, asking them to pay fees for being a part of this process is a stretch. And if they have to appeal up to the Planning Commission, as an example, simply because they were in a sort of a no-win situation by virtue of the timing, that troubles me. Is there anything we can do in terms of fee waivers within some limitation?
Jacqueline has her hand raised. Jacqueline?
What I'd like to do is, as Sylvia Gallegos outlined, we would like to go back and look at this and come back with either an off-agenda memo, because Supervisor Smithian, we absolutely, the planning department appreciates you bringing this, surfacing this, and what could the board do. So could we step back and put this together in a off-agenda memo or come back to Hewlett, because what you have proposed, we would really like to explore. And I think it would be a great opportunity for us to be transparent with the public and to have solid direction.
Thank you. I think I will then, with the chair, ask that we direct staff and county council to come back either to the board or the committee or with an off-agenda memo, which is a public document, with some clarity around how we can help folks going forward not be victims of the bad timing, how we can help folks who have already been victims of the bad timing sort themselves out as effectively as possible, and what staff might think of as, I'm going to describe it as a range of options with respect to fee forgiveness. And again, I don't want a system that encourages folks to just keep appealing because they can and there's no cost. But on the other hand, I really do feel like to date, we've had a process that was built for failure through, no fault of our own, and charging people for that does not strike me as the right approach. And then the last thing, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for your patience with this, I just want to say a couple of words that will seem a little broad, perhaps philosophical, but it's the way I feel about this issue. We're in a time in this country where people's faith and confidence in their public institutions has been strained in a way that I really can't remember. And, it's this kind of stuff that adds fuel to the fire. When government, and, I'm somebody who's been in the system for a long time in a lot of different roles, but when government can't get out of its own way, we can't be surprised that that has a really toxic impact on the way people feel about their government. And that spreads beyond isolated cases or individual decisions. So I see this as, obviously important to the folks who are caught up in the process, obviously important to folks who will follow them in the process. But to me, it's got a broader set of implications. And I know that may seem a little airy, but I think this is one of those times when we need to prove we can make the government work. And thank you for the flag. I'll take it. I'll let it go at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I get you to concur in my request or direction to staff?
Yes, I do have concurrence. I don't see this having any need to go to the board. If you wanted to come back to Hewlett, that's fine, or off agenda report. What is your preference?
Our preference would be, Sylvia, go ahead. I'm sorry. Sylvia, you were going to speak.
So I think the solutions we identify will dictate the form by which we respond. If we're going to waive fees and consider other options, I think that'll dictate it. But we're happy to advise, in the interim in an off-agenda memo indicating that we'll either go to the Hewlett or go directly to the board. You may want to be interested. You may frankly be interested in the range of options, and so we would certainly welcome that opportunity, but we also want to balance this with the idea that we would like to move quickly in light of the circumstances.
Thank you. What I would like is some obvious path for applicants, property owners to take through our system, knowing that July 1st, something else may change. But I think giving them advice and full knowledge, which I'm sure the Planning and Building Department is doing, telling them what is coming July 1st. And if somebody still wants to go ahead, as these 3 applicants did, then that mandates their future going this way. If the 4th applicant decides after everything he or she heard today and the direction that Supervisor Simitian has given in the request, which I agree with, they want to hold off and not apply, not appeal at this point and wait for something, the various things that Liz Ann said that we have in place as options for them to defer any finality to a decision until after July 1st, not pulling a building permit, for instance, those kinds of things. I think we have solutions in place, and I think the transparency of those to Supervisor Simitian and I is important. And I would ask that anything you feel is a major change, go back to this committee first, so this committee then can give direction to the board, but I really don't see this action as necessitating a board meeting of 5 people. I think the solutions are known. Between Jacqueline, between Robert, between Lisa, between Lizanne, I think we have a way to help people that are, and it's a very small amount of people, but to help people that are caught in between what's going on. Supervisor Simidian, is that fine with you?
Sounds good, Mr. Chair, but it sounds like we'll all have to stay on it, and I appreciate the willingness of people to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. So that is a motion. So Peggy, if we can have a 2-person roll call.
Chairperson Simidian, Vice Chairperson Simidian.
I'm sorry, it's a motion by Supervisor Simidian and second by me.
It is, and I vote aye.
And
Thank you.
Chairperson Wasserman.
Aye. Thank you very much. With that, we now turn on to item number 6. Consuelo should be appearing shortly. There she is. And this is to receive the annual progress report from the Office of Supportive Housing.
Good morning, Chairperson Wasserman and Vice Chairperson Simidian Consuelo Hernandez, Director with the Office of Supportive Housing. I will highlight a couple of points in the report and then happy to take questions. Through various actions, the board has allocated $30 million through 3 tranches of funding for affordable housing for households with an intellectual or developmental disability. And what you have in the report are the development projects that have been approved since the funding started back in 2018-ish or so. We do want to update you that one of the projects that was approved by the board, the Kelsey, unfortunately declined our funding because they did receive funding through a different state program, and the requirements of that state program were in conflict with our requirements for the target AMI levels. And so we now have $4 million available. Part of the recommendations that we would like to make to the full board so that we don't lose our goals is to allocate the $4 million to support the proposed Mitchell Park Place apartments. And also wanted to share there is one correction in the report. The Architectural Review Board meeting was actually this morning. Our team was double booked listening to that. We had about 10 supporters come out speaking in favor of the project, and the Architectural Review Board, their primary concerns around the project were the location of an electrical transformer and a trash can. So we'll be working with the staff. They had some comments, additional comments on the materials, but because we are using a streamlining act, there's limitations on what they can require. The other thing we wanted to highlight for you is that in November, the full board also made a modification to project type 3 based on comments that we received from the development community and from Housing Choices Coalition and a few others, that the requirements that we were imposing in project type 3 made it difficult for larger projects to meet the expectation of 25%. And while this change would reduce the number of units at any given project, we anticipate that it would actually lead to more developments having a smaller number. So with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and I really appreciate that last statement you made. We have no members of the public waiting to speak. Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think I have questions or even comments except to say that I think these funds, well, to say thank you to Ms. Hernandez, and then to say I think these funds have been serving their intended purpose when this issue first came to our board a few years back. I know the initial, I'll call it quasi commitment because we can never really commit beyond any given budget year, but the initial intention was certainly to run out 4 years. And I was very pleased to see in some of our budget discussions that there appears to be an intention by administration to continue trying to set aside $10 million a year to help with projects of this sort. I just want to be very clear about the fact that I support that direction. I can't speak for other members of the board, but my hope is that we will continue to do so. And thank you again to Ms. Hernandez and her colleagues for implementing the program. the end.
The end. I agree with what you said about the 10 million. And I also thank you, Consuelo, and your office for all your efforts to develop affordable housing for those most in need throughout the county. Your strategy, your efforts, you and your team are doing a fabulous job. Thank you. We'll consider item number 6 received, and we'll move on to item number 7, which is receiving a report from the Office of Supportive Housing, which is Consuelo again, regarding 525 Charleston Street in District 5.
Thank you again. And I am going to give Natalie Monk the opportunity to share an update with the committee.
Wonderful, Natalie.
Thank you, Consuelo. County staff continues to partner with Eden Housing on the development of Mitchell Park Place, located at 525 Charleston Road in Palo Alto. Eden previously submitted an SB 330 preliminary application and an application for streamlined approval of entitlements under AB 2162. The city of Palo Alto deemed the application complete on January 7th. And based on that date, the city's approval of project entitlements is expected to occur on or before March 8th. On January 28th, the project team held a focus group with members of the IDD community to get input on the project's design. And this morning, the project went before the city's architectural review board for a study session to give ARB members and the public another opportunity to ask questions and learn more, as you mentioned, Consuelo. Eden and their architect Fora continue to do community outreach on the project, and they're working on developing their financing plan for the project and are seeking additional funding. That concludes our update. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Natalie. We have no members of the public. Supervisor Simidian.
No, I'm good. I appreciate the update and want to simply exhort the staff to maintain the sense of urgency about bringing this project to a successful conclusion.
And getting an exhortation is a great thing. Consuelo, Natalie, thank you very much. This also has received report supervisors, so no vote necessary. We handled 8 through 14. So we are done unless Peggy disagrees.
No, completed the agenda.
Thank you. Let's consider this meeting adjourned. All of you have a wonderful day. Thank you very much, Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Recording stopped.